Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Susanna Yeti and I'm the Aegis Portfolio Marketing Manager at PCB, and I will be your host for today. Today we are presenting a world-class strategy to sustainable SHEQ, and our presenter is Mr. Francois Labuschagne. Mr. Francois is the Chief Executive Officer for DQS South Africa. He has more than 12 years experience in the management system development, education and certification environment, including 8 years at an executive management level. Before we get started, I would like to go over a few items so you know how to participate in today's event. You will have the opportunity to submit text questions to today's presenter by typing your questions in the question pane of the control panel. You may send in your questions at any time during the presentation. We will collect these and address them during the Q&A session at the end of today's presentation. You can also use the raise hand function. We will then unmute you and you will have a chance to ask the question directly to our presenter. Now, without further ado, we will turn the time over to Mr. Labuschagne. Mr. Labuschagne, you may start the presentation.
Susanna, thank you very much. Appreciate the platform, and thank you for the PCB for making this available. My talk is really going to start off with what we really mean about the strategy for sustainable SHEQ. I chose the word SHEQ that represents safety and health, environment and quality as a frame of reference, because it's a lot more than that. We talk about asset management, talk about supply chain security, etc. And as I go through the presentation, everything will become a lot more clearer. So if we can go on. I think it all starts with the point where we said the view, and we ask ourselves in organizations, what do we see? What picture do we see? We have these silos in businesses, and each function is looking after a specific mandate within the business. And the big concern that we have within organizations is that they only see a certain part of the picture. And the reality is that if you really want to run a successful organization, you need to be able to have meaningful information that relates to the total business, because ultimately all of the functions of the business of a business is directly and indirectly related to the successes that we will expect in the future. I wanted to just quickly touch base on corporate governance. So we talk about an organization, and ultimately at the end of the day, an organization needs to demonstrate corporate governance. Governance first prescribed by big companies listed on the stock exchange, has obviously filtered down to small organizations, and I guess the word corporate governance really goes then hand in hand with ethics. The way we do things around here, what we do, and in the transparent way that we're doing it. That's a big challenge for big organizations, because it's so big and so robust and things change so quickly. But governance is one aspect that that obviously will be the ultimate objective when we talk about business success, a good strategy for sustainable business. We talk about sustainable reporting. In order for you to demonstrate corporate governance, you'd have to have a look and see what you do as far as triple bottom line reporting is concerned, social, environmental and financial. And more so also giving the confidence to your stakeholders, interested parties and employees, etc. So that was a little background. Then obviously I'd like to go ahead and talk about the international perspective on organizational risk management and its significance and its impact in the enterprise-wide risk assessment sphere. We all have heard and know about enterprise risk management, and for a safety, environmental, quality person, those words are obviously maybe pretty new, in the sense that they haven't really been that involved with insurance negotiations, with the underwriters in business and so forth. And enterprise-wide risk management has always been up there from the board perspective, and it was a lot more financial based and not operational risk based. So enterprise risk management is obviously the process in which organization can identify opportunities and risks and deal with them accordingly. But more importantly, the enterprise risk management process is then divided into two. It's speculative risk and pure risk. When we talk about speculative risk, it's the risks that the organization face when they decide they want to start a new business, when they want to venture into new markets, when they want to do different things, and that is strategic risk. And then there's a financial risk that falls under the speculative risk sphere, and that would be a financial risk as far as resources, finances is concerned, to finance that initiative. This speculative risk part from an enterprise-wide risk management perspective is obviously then managed largely by the board of directors of an organization. It's the pure risk side that really starts the foundation of what I'm passionate about, and that's the operational risk part of the business. That involves people, processes, technology, and the environment, etc. And these risks obviously is then managed by leadership groups within the organization. And that could be the financial, environmental, HR, research and development, marketing and sales manager, etc. What is very important is that we're sort of sitting in two camps, and the one is that when you talk about risk management, everyone from a director's perspective jump up and say, well, that's what we do. When we look at the organization more downwards, from an operational perspective, they don't really have a say in what mitigating factors are being put into place. So something from James Lamb, who he said that from an enterprise risk management perspective, it's to enable and to identify, prioritize, and manage risk. An ERM program ought to focus first on strategic risk and then followed by operational risk. And in his opinion, financial risk should obviously become a distant third in that respect. And later on I'll show some case studies that just puts that point in case. Very, very simple. We're looking at strategic level, management level, and operational level, and the risk portion as far as being a risk that's a gain or a loss. Management level, gain or loss, and operational level, only a loss. And we can talk a little bit about that afterwards when we talk about maturity curves of business. So that's sort of a little bit of background. And what I want to do now is I want to show you those critical control points that I believe is a world-class strategy in actually addressing business management in organizations. So that's the little picture there, and if we have a look at the left-hand side, doesn't matter how big or small you are as an organization, activism factors will affect your business. And when you have a business, legal, unions, whether it's code of standards, medical research, the fact that asbestos is an issue, etc., all of those things will affect your business. And unless you understand those activism factors and you have related that back into a risk assessment process where you identify those risks, are they an issue for you, and how are you going to deal with that in future? So from an enterprise risk assessment, risk management perspective, there's risk assessment. We talk about a baseline risk assessment, issue-based and continuous risk assessment. And at the end of the day, this tool obviously helps you to identify and say, well, these are the top 10 of my most fierce risks in the organization. I need to deal with it in a certain way. You put plans in place, you put actions in place, you put processes, procedures, you communicate them and you implement them and review. I'm not going to get too much detail as far as enterprise risk or risk assessment is concerned. I think there's two standards, ISO 31001 and also ISO 31010, which talks about the methodology of different types of risk assessment, whether it's whether it's Pty, SWIFT, FMEAs, etc. But typically from a risk register perspective, once you've identified those risk issues, a description of the risk, the impact, the probability of occurrence, and so forth. And various organizations use different methodologies. The main point in case here is to make sure that you've identified the risk, that you are aware of it, and that you've got something implemented or something that's there that if it happens, you can deal with it accordingly. So then obviously out of that process, this is your example of your risk profile in the organization. And organization needs to have that, and your top management should know what their top risks are. What's your risk profile? Most of the cases, top management in the financial side would know that because they use that for the renegotiations of their short-term insurance with their brokers and the underwriters. The next step, now that we understand our risks, we need to obviously put codes, practices, and standards in place to make sure that we deal with them accordingly. And that's typically your management system. What's very important is that if we look at a business is run and it carries on. There's nothing sinister about it. And what we tend to do is we tend to sort of plug and put things in as a plug and play to satisfy certain requirements. What I want to go and show you then is obviously a typical management system. Various international standards could apply, and I'd like to reiterate the point that the standards are voluntary and, in my opinion, an excellent playbook if I want to get involved and get to look at better ways of looking after my customer, for instance. I would then take the ISO 10001 standard and look at what the best practices are as far as that's concerned, whether it's supply chain, business continuity, energy management, etc. But what's important is for those international standards, not for you to fit in with them, but for them to fit in within your organization. If we look at those there, we talk about organization, we say you've got a strategic management component within your organization, and then you have your core business processes and you've got your support processes. Very often what we do is we say we'd like to embark on a safety management system, and then we'll build something on the side, and it doesn't really talk to the whole business from an holistic perspective. We talk about King, Turnbull, Baines-Oxley as far as corporate governance is concerned on the left-hand side. On the far right, information security, which is really becoming a big issue within organizations, and obviously customer-specific requirements, specifically in the automotive industry, and obviously the different conventional standards. It's then very important to understand the enterprise level of your business, the functional level of your business, and then the process level of your business. Now that we understand our risks, we've got a system, we've got a business with processes which manages these risks on a daily basis while we're making money. We also need to make sure that every single individual that partakes in this business and has some kind of relation to a specific process in the business is competent and trained. Not just safety trained, but business trained. Understand how to operate machinery effectively from a lean perspective and so forth. Leadership, management training. So you need competent people in order for you to do that. But what's very important in that respect is, again, not to put everyone through a machine and saying, well, let's all train them and then at least we know everyone has gone through this process. It's to be very selective and identifying this skill profile of what each person within the organization actually needs to have in order for them to drive the business forward. successfully. Now, the interesting part about this is we've got a great management system. We've identified our risks. We've got a great management system. We've got competent people, and then there's a little thing that creeps up that says behavior risk management. And this is where individuals do not conform to processes and procedures, and there's a reason for it, maybe it's lapses, etc. But I'm yet to meet someone that wakes up in the morning and say, today is the day that I'm going to be in a car accident, or today is the day that I'm going to forget to switch off or log out and electrocute myself. So from a behavior perspective, people do things and don't do things, and when we look at that part, business will have to start and look at certain aspects where employee engagement is very important, critical behaviors are identified within specific tasks, etc., and supervisors, superintendents, and middle management and senior management are involved in this. And what was very interesting is someone once mentioned to me that a program like this is not a program, it's a process, and it takes years. A program has a start date and a finish date. The process is forever. And a lot of times when people talk about engaging with employees, they have campaigns, but those campaigns sort of run for a couple of months and then it stops, and then it's just back to normal again. And eventually the employees think it's another flavor of the month exercise, and they sort of support it not wholeheartedly. But that's one component that I believe from a business culture perspective, from an organizational health perspective, it is important because our people drives the business. Now, we might have great people and the competence is there, the behavior is there, the activism factors are all in line, and all of a sudden something happens that's out of our control. That could be a political factor, it could be a world market factor, a disaster, a flood, etc. And the real question then is how do we deal with that? We've got this beautiful business, we've got great people, we've identified all our risks, we're just doing everything correct, and yet here's a disaster or an issue, and how do we deal with that from a business perspective? So from a business continuity perspective, in my opinion, again, business continuity is really the ability of a business to carry on with business while in times of crisis. And we have a lot of those cases. Current state of a business risk, a business continuity program is obviously on understanding what could go wrong, and if it goes wrong, what is the action plans to lessen the blow, as so to say. So we've looked at the enterprise risk side, we've looked at management systems, we've looked at knowledge management, behavior, business continuity, and then we're looking at the assessment and auditing component. One of the most critical and probably the silver bullet in any organization is the internal audit process, because that's where they can continuously identify where they have implemented system, where it's working for them, and where it's going great and where it's not going so great, and ultimately obviously deal with those accordingly. Now, these assessments can be done as far as risk assessment, management system, training, behavior, monitoring of people, the business continuity management component, and then information security on corrective action. If you do these internal audits, whether you're a small or a big company, is the ability to get benchmark out of it. And they say some people learn out of other people's mistakes, and the rest of us must be the other people. Now, if there's certain pockets of excellence within your organization, then it'll be a great opportunity to apply those excellences in areas in your organization that is not that excellent. So applying best practices and benchmarking is probably one of the most exciting tools out there for any organization to continuously improve. The last part obviously is information management, and businesses are so complex these days that there's so much information, and you can only manage what you can measure. And what do you measure? You measure what information you get. So when we talk about software or some kind of system that collates this data, but integrates it to the point that even from an asset management perspective, maintenance, the stores, the training, all of these interrelate, because ultimately, at the end of the day, I'd just like to go back to this slide here. You'll see that information management then moves into management information, it moves into management review, and then it moves into corrective action. It goes back into whether you understand your business, and the process flows down the way we've just explained it. So if this is not done, what can the impact be? You can have insurance, you can have all those checks and balances as far as public liability insurances, company insurance, director's liability insurance, and financially you can have all of that in some kind of safe place. But the reality is that if accidents then happen or incidents happen, it has a major effect on organizations, even to the point in seeing certain companies' share price fall 4%, 11%, and the BP side, the BP plunged 7%, because investors panic. And this organization has great management systems, but they might have neglected certain components within that process of risk management. Reputational risk is something that I believe is going to be a huge component as far as in business itself is concerned, and we are going to see that consumerism will start to drive business success. And unfortunately not the MD, because there's a lot of people out there with Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn, and they talk, and their friends talk. So reputational risk is a huge issue. Lastly, cost of risk. When we look at cost of risk, we talk about the cost of loss, cost of handling risk, the cost imposed by that risk, and obviously the reputation and the image of the organization itself, which is unmeasurable in my opinion. Cost of loss. This is just a figure that I'm pretty sure you'll get this webinar, the slides, but the more key indicators that I'd like to share with you is obviously from a cost of loss perspective. If that subtotal is X, the cost of handling the risk, and that's typically the iceberg scenario, the cost imposed by the risk, which we talk about insurance, internal insurance, external, and whether it's a compensation commissioner that you pay for your employees, and then obviously the reputational and image side of the risk. What is even more significant is the fact that if you have an organization and you run your business on a profit margin of 5, 10, 15 or 20%, and your yearly incident costs are 100 million or 300 million or 500 million, this little graph shows you exactly what your turnover requirements would have to be in order for you to cater for that yearly incident costs that has occurred. So from that perspective then, the last one is just any organization, and very, very importantly, I think in any business, the business management owners need to identify and see where they stand as far as the maturity model or a maturity level is concerned in their business. Whether they're on a basic level, it's just basically driven by law. We will just do what we need to do and be legally compliant. And I'm not talking about safety legal compliance, I'm talking about Companies Acts, Information Acts, all these labor laws, etc. So it's a basic level, it's a reactive level where we just do it because when we have to do it. Compliance level, proactive level, and a resilient level. And that journey is obviously, if you look at stage 1, crisis management, it's the ignorance stage. We talk about stage 2, which is the awakening stage. Stage 3, enlightenment, wisdom, and ultimately stage 5, which is certainty. And that's the DNA generative component, and that's the resilience part. The resilience in doing things right sustainably. So that in a nutshell is the presentation. I think we do have another 4 minutes, but I think we can get some questions. I just want to first, this one quote that sort of resonated with me, and I think that most organizations, when I talk to them, the part when they say that they've tried it and it didn't work, when you look at the change management process or the way that they do change management. John Cotter said that for years of study, he says he estimated to today that more than 70% of needed change either fail to be launched even though some people clearly see the need for that change, or it fails to be completed even though some people exhaust themselves trying to make that change. And then obviously the last one is finished over budget and late and with initial aspirations unmet by those individuals. So change management in any business is also a critical component. I think in a nutshell then, I'd like to close off and say that one of the 3 fundamental things that business needs to address is the internal audit process, the measurement component, so that they have meaningful information, that meaningful information will relate to proper management review meetings. Out of the management review meetings, proper action plans take place and implemented in organization, and the process to be followed and obviously continuously improved. So I thank you very much for listening to me on this Friday. I will now go and ask for everyone if there's any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Francois. We will go ahead and take some time for questions now. Just a reminder, please be sure to type your questions in the question box in your right-hand control panel. So the first question is, what to do in case the top management doesn't want to implement the SHEQ, and how does one convince them?
I don't think they have a choice anymore. If a business wants to survive, they have to look at safety, health, environment, and quality, operational risk. I would be very, I wouldn't see that any organization would not want to do it. I think the reason why people don't do it is because they believe that it's a different division, a separate section that's going to look after safety, health, environment, and quality. And from that perspective, it's basically a cost center. I don't think that they understand that it's actually a part of their business and it's the way that they should be doing things. So maybe the way to actually convince or to get these top management level guys to understand that that's the way to do it is to educate them. You know, there's lots of things on the internet or whatever that you can share with them. But it's got to make you more effective and more profitable and more effective and more efficient. And that's really what it is. It's a playbook to become a champion. And if there's managers out there that believes it's not for them, I think they're in for a big surprise because it's not, those businesses will not succeed in future. I don't think any business can afford not to identify its risks. I don't think any business can afford not to train their people. And, you know, maybe our biggest mistake that we've ever made in my lifetime is the fact that we've called it safety. And we're trying to police it rather than making it part of the organization and the way they do things. I hope that answers the question, but that is a difficult one. You know, at the end of the day, you can only change someone's thinking by convincing them, and by convincing them, you know, they need to see it.
Thank you. The next question is, should top management look to internal audit to identify risk, interpret the guidance of ISO 31000, helping management to manage business and social media and cyber risk?
I'd like to break that up. The question was related to, should top management use their internal audit?
Yeah, should they look to internal audit to identify risks?
Absolutely. I think that well, obviously from a certification perspective, when we go in and we look at these organizations, the biggest problem that they have in actually driving their business forward is the fact that they do not, their internal audit processes is not effective. It's not efficient. The second thing is that during that auditing process, a lot of things are overlooked. And when it comes to actually putting those corrective actions in place and management having a look at them, taking it through to the management review process, it's always an issue. 90% of organizations do not do management review properly, and they do not get the benefit of that management review. And again, then the question there was on 31,000. I think it's a great guidance document for any organization to use as far as risk management is concerned. I wouldn't overlook ISO 31010, which is the tools of risk assessment. And when we talk about cyber, 27,000, information security, absolutely. I wouldn't even overlook the component as far as asset management is concerned. ISO 55,000. You know, the supply chain component. And I guess that we are in for a very exciting time. And, you know, I don't want to talk too much about standards, but the reality is that 9,000 has always been a very successful standard and people apply it, but now it's basically saying that we do not want, as certification bodies, we do not necessarily want to talk to the quality person or the safety person or the environmental person anymore. We would like to talk to top management because they need to understand the business. And you cannot outsource accountability. You can only outsource responsibility. But ultimately, top management is accountable for that business. And that is, again, where governance comes in. Thank you.
Thank you. Since we are running out of time, I would like to ask you the last question for today's session, and that is, what are some of the common issues with SHEQ?
Common issues with SHEQ. The common issues with SHEQ. Susanna?
Yeah, that is the question. What are the common issues? I think they wanted to ask maybe what are the common issues when implementing it, perhaps.
You know, in my opinion, the sincerity in how we do it, you know, there's absolutely no way that you're going to be able to police quality, safety, environmental, asset management, maintenance, engineering, and these kind of things. I think the individuals, that individual that stands at the lathe, the person that makes the coffee, the person that drives the truck, they are the drivers of successful business. And, you know, by default, they should be complying to what the expectation is of an organization. We do not have to teach them clause 5.6 or 5.7 or 8.2, neither does the driver have to know that regulation 5.8 says that they need to stop at a stop sign. The more important thing is that they just need to do what they need to do, and by default, us as management need to make sure that they are competent in doing that safely, from a quality perspective, environmentally safe, etc. So this is a subject that can just, that can be broken up into smaller chunks, and there's a lot of experts out there that will say this is the silver bullet and this is the silver bullet and this is how we do it, and so forth. My presentation and those little blocks, all I'm saying is that I don't care if you hop, skip and jump between them, but the reality is that those are the critical aspects that will make or break any initiative or any change management process. And ultimately, I believe that top management has seen the light. There's lots of organizations, social media is out there. They see these things on YouTube and Facebook and LinkedIn and all these things. So I think the driver, if you had asked a safety person whether he would be reporting directly to the MD of a company in 1990, he would have said absolutely not. Today, that's taking place. The same with environmental and the same with quality and the rest, because their input is needed into the global reporting initiative.
Mr. Francois, thank you very much for this presentation once again. And I will also like to thank everyone for attending today's webinar. Once you leave the webinar, you will receive a survey on the presentation, and we would appreciate it if you could complete it and provide your feedback. Also, if you're aware of a topic that you would like to discuss and participants would benefit from, please feel free to write down suggestions. On behalf of PCB and our presenter, thank you for joining us today and have a great weekend.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.